Good morning, I'm Pablo.
I'm Macy. I'm Faith. I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Rex.
And this is Art and Fashion and Comic Books.
Okay, the question we wanted to answer is how art and fashion trends are reflected on comic book covers, which we'll be describing throughout the decades.
Okay, so the history of comic books can be divided into ages, the first of which is the Golden Age. And the Golden Age featured simplistic art with a straightforward plot and square grids. It was very dialogue heavy, and it was marketed towards children with the simple black and white morals and like straightforward good versus evil plot.
After that, we have the Silver Age, which was really characterized by a loss of some of that innocence and youth that was so prevalent in the Golden Age. So readers in this time grew higher expectations for their art, and so artists began incorporating higher art techniques.
Moving on to the Bronze Age in comics, authors used up pretty much all small-scale plots and moved on to tougher enemies for the superheroes to face. Superheroes' alter egos, aka Clark Kent when he's not Superman, got more panel time, and we got to see their issues when they weren't donning their capes.
Moving on to the Dark Age, this is when comic books started becoming darker. They started playing with deep, dark, contrasting colors. They had darker plots and had a sense of unease.
Lastly is the Ageless in the modern age, which from 1993 to present day. They continue with the contrast and the dark colors, and they use more of the technology with their comic book covers.
Okay, so jumping off in the Silver Age in the 60s, some major influences on comic book art included Surrealism, and although Surrealism wasn't contemporary, it was still used by artists to convey some dark topics and morally ambiguous characters. Then later on we had pop art, as seen by the Roy Lichtenstein piece here. It influenced fashion and later Silver Age comics, and there was also a two-way influence between pop art and comics where they influenced each other. Okay, so right off the bat in this piece we can see obvious surrealist influences, specifically Salvador Dali, with like the melting terrain and the floating clocks. And so we can see that it's much more experimental and mature and dark than like the Golden Age counterpart. And we can see that the characters, their motives are not completely clear at first, and good versus evil is mostly hinted at and not really just black and white. Alright, so the 70s were a transition period between the Silver Age and the Bronze Age. Some major influences included second wave feminism, which brought to light many injustices and inequalities. Then hyperrealism, which was used by artists to convey real human issues. And finally, pop art continued to be a major influence. Okay, so here, first we can see some parallels with pop art with the use of primary colors that are really striking. There's also evidence of influence by hyperrealism because the cover is much less experimental and more photorealistic, which conveys more human issues that define the Bronze Age. And these issues, in this case alcoholism, but also commonly depicted were addiction and bigotry, were brought to light by the many social movements and influenced the political climate at the time.
And now we have the 1980s, or as it is colloquially known, the Age of Excess. So this title is because of the large emphasis on bright colors and deep contrast within the comic book art and also the fashion and art of this decade. So in addition, artists began to explore darkness, and that means like subversion from the very strict censorship laws of that time, as well as the investigation into the film genre of blaxploitation. And if you don't know, that is the genre that was targeting niche African American audiences, which was also a major trend of this time. So on the left, we have The Dark Knight Returns, and as you can see, many of the trends of the 80s are very obvious here, like the lighting and the setting, as well as the dynamic composition of the piece. So in addition, you can see that the piece is clearly marketed toward a more adult audience. On the right, we have Hero for Hire, which is the first Marvel superhero comic to feature an African American as the main lead. So as you can see, the color choosing is very bright, as with the trends of the 80s. And the stereotypes can be seen in the clothing and the environment in which the African American superhero is placed.
Moving forward to the year 1990 to the years 2000, turn of the century. So first of all, let's go over a quick overview, which in the fashion world was bright colors. You can see with the jacket right over here. But Gothic fashion also saw its rise in the late 90s, and you can see a boot over there as well. Stripes were all the rage, along with hip-hop fashion like big, baggy, oversized clothing, along with really funky looking patterns. In the art world, however, the rise of the digital age, aka new technologies, allowed artists to incorporate some of that technology into their work. However, some chose to stay away from that and use the more traditional acrylics, oils, and watercolors, etc., etc. Here you have two varying art styles of Lisa Frank and Eric Dinger, and you can see there are two very different color choices and just styles in general. Now for our comic book cover, you have Avengers Infinity #1, Lost in the Stars, published into the year 2000. On the Marvel website, there is a brief summary which states that our favorite group of superheroes is going through an unforeseen problem in an unknown location or unfamiliar location, which is the galaxy. On the cover, you see Photon, who has the brightly colored aura right over here. You also have the contrasting colors of Tigra with her orange and blue body/attire over here. Flowing clothing reminiscent of the hip-hop age, aka really flowy capes like with Thor and Pulsar right over here. And their position on the cover is again reminiscent of the Dark Age in comics with their unnatural, uneasy position on the cover where they're just staring at you head on.
So next we have 2000 to 2010, which was the rise of the digital age. Okay, so for fashion, we have clothes that started being more exposing. We have vintage clothing, hip-hop fashion that was trending, and we have bright colors. Were still popular, but more in the early 2000s. So for art, we have advances in realism, advances in art techniques, and we have conservative art. That is when the artist gets to express their feelings or emotions in art. So for Dr. Blink, Superhero Shrink from 2007, we can see these fashion trends because we have like chokers that they have spandex leggings, geometric pattern shirts. They have clothes that are more exposing, and they have like as you can see in this image, we have shoes and boots with rounded flat toes. And then for art, we have conservative art because of the unique art techniques, and you can see like shading, and we can see how they use like shadows. So that is.
Okay, next is 2010-2017 age. Before I start my slide, before I start my slide, does anyone know what's trending right now? Raise your hand. Annie.
The 80s are making a slight comeback.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But
Anybody
it's
else?
Claire, did you raise your hand? Oh, we're calling you anyway.
Oh, Claire, yeah. What's fashionable right now?
I don't know, I guess more like
Yeah, alright. So, here. These are all good answers, but I'll tell you what's actually fashion trends right now. Okay. So, fashion right now is something very leathery pants, leathery jackets, there's knee-high boots, and there's a lot of people that nowadays, the teens, they wear leggings and very skin-tight jeans. For art being shown, they have a lot of contrast, they use darker colors to depict like the lighter and the darker areas of the picture. So in this comic book cover, X-Men Curse of the Mutants, on the cover you can see that the very tight clothing, which is on Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm in the background, that it's all just covered with dark areas, but there's also a lot of contrast in the picture. There's also, everyone's wearing black because black is apparently to make you slimmer and make you feel taller. Leather, all the superheroes are wearing leather for their super suits, which is fashionable in 2010 to 2017.
Alright, so we have a couple limitations with our argument. First of all, art and fashion are technically very, very subjective, meaning that each artist has their own unique way of putting their content out there. So they have different interests, art styles, and varying some trends that aren't reflected on comic books is purely up to the artist's choice, just because it's intention versus coincidence and their own ideas versus what was trending in that moment. So from different